Welcome back guys to another video for the inventory series. In this episode, what we're going to be working on is the ability to actually pick up and move items. So that's going to be a little bit more complicated, but I'm going to talk you guys through it and we're going to be able to move items by the end of this video. Apart from that, there's also probably going to be another video separately, which has got to do with saving and loading the inventory as per request, but we'll see how we go with this episode and we'll go from there, I guess. So yeah, let's get on with it real quick. So firstly, obviously we have our items here as our slot class list and whatnot, and we have our inventory use interface. That's all nice. However, we do need another game object, and this is going to be on the canvas as well, and it's just going to be a little bit of an image. So I'm going to create a UI image. Now what this image is basically going to be, let's make it 60 by 60. 60 by 60, no, it will be 50 by 50, right? Yeah. So it's going to be, make this red so we can see it. This is the placeholder image. So when we pick up an item and we're moving it, this is going to be what's following our mouse. So let's call this cursor. And if we're not holding anything, that's going to be hidden, of course. For now, we don't have to worry about this. We're just going to set up the other functionality, but I thought we'd just prepare that in advance. So let's open up our inventory manager. Okay, so we have a few functions here. First thing I'm going to do is minimize refresh, minimize add, and minimize remove. And I'll minimize contains as well. A lot of these functions we're going to update now because we're going to redo some of the way we do our inventory. For example, at the moment, our items is a list of slot classes. This is fine for the other purposes. However, for this, we need a set amount of slots, which have to obviously be, which means we're going to use a slot class array. So public slot class items. Now, slots equals new game object is. That's fine. What I have to do is items equals new slot class array of length slots dot length. Now that should be fine. So now there we go. Okay, a bit confused why. All right, so we have a few errors going on here, specifically going to be with the add function. Here we go. Because these obviously don't exist, these functions, and neither does remove, and probably contains doesn't either. Contains does. Okay, never mind. All right, fine. What we have to do when we say add and remove, this is fine for the purposes of a list. However, when it comes to using arrays, we have to do this a little bit more manually. So what I'm going to do real quick, just to test stuff, I'm going to comment out everything. And then I'm just going to comment these lines out as well. And I'm just going to debug.log the length of items. Debug.log items, items.length. And you'll see why I want to do this in just a sec. And as you can see, we have 15. However, here we have error, which is to do with cloud. Okay, so therefore it works. Yes. Okay, that's fine. Cool. All right, I'm going to ignore that error because that's not to do with our code. Beautiful. That means that function works. Cool. Now let's set up the add function so that the add function works. Refresh UI will be fine. Add function. Let me do this and move this to down here. We need to make sure contains exists. There we go. Beautiful. Right. Yeah. So this is fine there, but we're going to use a different method now because our method is going to do this automatically. We're going to do a for loop through every slot and then make sure if we found an empty slot, add it there. So for int I equals 0, I less than items dot length I plus plus, and then we're going to check if items I dot get item is equal to null. That means there's an item. There's no item there. This is an empty slot. Then we can say items I dot add dot set. What was that function called again? Get item subsequent add quantity. I can set it to a new slot class, to be fair. Items I equals new slot class, and we're going to set it to not this overload. Where is it? This one. So our item is going to be item. Our quantity is going to be 1. Just like that. Okay, so now that means that our add function should work in theory. Let's see what happens. What we might need to do is have an add item function. Let's try that. Public void add item. And this will take in an item class item and then a int quantity. There we go. And this will say this dot item equals item, and then this dot quantity equals quantity. Be careful about the syntax highlighting here. See how this one is white and this one is blue? Because it's reading off these ones. That's why this is important. This dot item equals this item. So yeah, that way I can then say dot add item, item and quantity will be 1. Okay, so that didn't work either. What is going on? Okay, so I've been getting some errors with this function here for some reason. So I'm going to rewrite this function as is. We'll say for int I equals 0, I less than items dot length I plus plus. No idea what the problem is with this function, but it just doesn't want to work. So that's fine. Return null at the end. If items I dot get item is not equal to null, and items I dot, in fact I don't even need to do that really. If items I dot get item is equal to item, then return items I. Now if this doesn't work, then I don't know what will. So what I can do is in the start function, after I initialize items, like make it the folder itself, I can then say, go through and say items I equals new slot class. Right? So now they should be all new slot classes. However, if this still produces null, then there is a problem going on, probably in the slot class. Now that worked. Fantastic. So that's what we needed. We need a loop going through and initializing all the slots. That makes sense. Cool. So now we can get rid of this. We don't need to debug this. That's fine. Okay, we do this. If items I is this. Cool. I'm going to put this in another bracket, like so. And actually what I have to do is say return true, because we've added it. So now we can actually don't return true. I want to break. Yeah, so because we don't want to keep looping. We've added the item once. That's fine. Finish that loop and then return true. And a very similar sort of method is going to be used for the remove function. There we go. So one sword. Fantastic. Let's go to test and just remove test. Very nice. I'm going to do the same thing for the remove function now, so that we have remove working too. Obviously, this is a problem here. For example, slot to remove equals slot. So we find the slot to remove and then break, and then we say items dot remove. That is not what we want to do. We want to actually just say items I. No, we can't do that. We should make, okay, so what we'll do, we'll say int slot index, slot to remove index, I guess. You can come up with a better name for this, but this is just so it makes sense for everyone. I'm going to set to 0, and then I'm going to do a for loop here for int I equals 0, I less than items dot length, I less than items dot length, and then I plus plus, of course. Now, if slot dot get item this, no, that's not what we want to do. I'm going to say if items I dot get item is equal to the item we're trying to remove, slot to remove index equals I, and then break, and the items I dot set empty. Dot set, or is it dot clear? Well, dot clear. Beautiful. Items, not items, slot to remove. That's the one. Okay, dot clear break, return false, blah, blah, blah. All right, cool. If you don't have the clear function, which you might not, it is here. I might have added this after the last episode. Can't exactly remember. But yeah, so just copy that if you don't have it. It's quite simple. That said, what I actually want to do as well, I want our actual inventory items here. So this one to be private. I don't want to see that one. I also want to have a private serialized field actually. So this should be serialized field, private slot class array, and this is going to be starting items. Now, what I want to do is say starting items obviously is going to be the items that we start with, right? So I will need to add them in our start function here. So once I initialize all the slots, they all have a value now. I can say for int I equals this, that's fine. I'm just going to copy that. Except not items.length. I want to say starting items.length. And then I can say items I equals starting items I. So copy that, paste I. There we go. And that way, now our items here is going to disappear. We'll get a new array. Very nice. And here, for example, I want to say, let me start with an apple, right? Let me start with 5 apples or something as well. So our sword's going to be added and we'll already have 5 apples. And this basically just brings us back to where we started from. There we go, 5 apples. Now, the problem is that we said we want to remove an apple and it hasn't removed. So the question then becomes, why hasn't that removed? Is because we have it commented down here. There we go. Let us go back into Unity and see if that works this time. We should now have 4 apples and a sword. Let's see if that's the case. If that is the case, then we can actually get on with the moving side. Yes. Okay, cool. Now, the next step is actually to detect when we press down. So we need a void update function. So private void update. And this should actually be private as well. I don't know why it's public. Yeah. Okay, cool. So private void update. Now this is going to detect when we click down on our mouse. So to do that, obviously it is if input.get mouse button down 0. And this now means we have clicked. So what we have to do when we click is find the closest slot or the slots we clicked on. Now to do that, I'm going to have a function which returns our closest slots. So let me do this. There we go. And now I'm going to create a region here. So region inventory utils. And this is just the stuff that our inventory does. And region. There we go. And realistically, you should say inventory utils here as well. But that's up to you. There we go. And now, because I don't have to see that, those work. But this is where the actual moving stuff comes in. So we can create another region here and call this moving stuff or whatever you want to do. So end region. And then all our moving stuff is going to go inside here. So if you don't know about regions, there's not much to them. Basically, it is just a way to collapse your code, like large sections of your code. It just keeps it a little bit more tidy. But yeah, anyway, so let's have a private, I think. Yeah, private. Private, and let's say we'll return the closest slot. So let's say a private slot class find or get closest slot. And this won't take any parameters. It will just be just like that. Cool. And let's just return null for now. Now what this has to do is find the cursor's position. So let's say I think it's debug.log input.get mouse position or input.mouse position, something like that. Cool. So input .mouse position is obviously our mouse position on the screen or in the game. So, and I think that's already in relation to the canvas as well. So that's fine. We don't have to do any transforming or whatnot. So what we have to do now is for each game, for each slot game object, we have to calculate its distance to the cursor. If its distance is less than a certain threshold, i.e. its radius of the slot, that means we clicked on the slot. So for int I equals 0 as always, I less than items.length I plus plus. We're gonna, so this is obviously looping through every item. In fact, it should probably be slots.length. Let's say. Yeah, okay. So if slots dot no, if vector2 dot distance between slots dot transform slots I dot transform dot position and inputs dot mouse position, if the distance there is less than or equal to, I think, 30, let's say 32 to give it some padding. If the distance is less than that, then we want to return items I, which is obviously the same slot. Okay, otherwise we return null. So when I press mouse button down, I want to debug.log get closest slot. Now I'm going to get rid of this log statement as well. Cool, let's go back into Unity. If I clear that, press play. Now if I click here, it says null. If I click here, it says slot class. Beautiful. Except we don't know if it's actually detecting the right slot. So let me say get closest slot dot get item. Now we're going to log the item in that slot. So when we click on the sword, it should say sword, obviously. But let's see if that's the case. If that's the case, then we are on the right track. Sword tool class, Apple tool class, null, null. Oh, null reference exception, that's true. Because, I mean, that's fine. That for our purposes there, that's fine. Okay, cool. So now what we should do as well, get closest slot is fine. That works. That's beautiful. That's very similar to our contains method. It's just going to be a helper void for all our other voids. So private bool, let's have a begin item move. Now begin item move first needs to say, have we clicked on a slot? So if, well, we'll have a slot class here. We'll create a few slots. So private slot class moving slots. And then we'll have another one, another two actually, temp slot we'll need. And we'll need another one, but that's not just yet. We'll figure that one out soon. So begin item move, it should say slots, moving slots equals get closest slot. So this is the slot that we want to move. If moving slot is equal to null, or moving slot dot get item is equal to null, then we'll just return false. We were false. There is no item move. Okay, otherwise we can move. So I'm going to return true. There we go. And we want to say moving slots. Well, realistically, moving slots should equal dot equals new slot class using get closest slots. That's how it should be. There we go. Okay, so moving slot is this. Now, what I have to do, you know what? I might do this. Okay, so we're gonna make this called original slots. Original slots. Cool. And original slot is going to equal this. Original slots. There. So this is the slot we clicked on. Now, because this, yes, the original slot, then we say set empty. Set dot clear, because we've picked the item up from there now. However, before we clear it, I want to say moving slot, which is the slot we have in our hand. That's the slot we're moving. Moving slot equals new slot class using original slot. Perfect. So when you click on a slot, the item in it should disappear. It didn't do that because we didn't actually call the method. Begin item move. There we go. Because we're saying equal to new slot class, we should actually say equals get closest slot. What we actually forgot to do was refresh UI. So now when we click, it will remove it and then refresh the user interface, which should now mean that we should see the items disappear when we click on it. There we go. Now, here's the thing. We can obviously click on 2, which isn't correct. We need a boolean here. So we'll say bool is moving item. Now, what we should say, when we click down, okay, a few things should happen. First, if we're moving an item, then we don't want to begin moving item because we're already moving item. We want to end item move. This means that by left clicking, we can pick up and drop an item, right? So otherwise, else we're not moving an item, so just do this. Yeah, okay, that is fine. Now the function doesn't exist, so I do have to use these brackets like that. Okay, cool. So if moving item, do that. Else begin item move. Cool. Before we return true, I want to say is moving item equals true. So we're successful in beginning to move our item. And that should be good there. So now we should only be able to remove one item at a time. So if I remove the sword, I shouldn't be able to remove the apples. And that works. Cool. Now we need to do the end item move function. So private bool end item move. Okay, so again, original slot equals this. We do need to say original slot equals get closest slot again. Okay, and now we can say here end item move. The original slot equals get closest slot. Now when we place an item, obviously we want to refresh UI. And then return true. Now there's a few things which we should take into account here. Firstly, does the slot we clicked on to place the item, that's what original slot is now, does it already contain an item? So if original slot dot get item is not equal to null. Okay, so it already has an item in it. Now, if there already is an item in it, is it the same as the item we're trying to place in it? So if original slot dot get item equal to moving slots dot get item. In this case, they are the same item, which means they should stack, right? Now, in the case where they aren't the same item, yeah, in the case where they aren't the same item, then obviously it's not going to do this. It's going to do this else statement, right? No, we do need that. Okay, yeah. So, okay, so if there's an item already existing there, then is it the same item? Then stack them. Otherwise, they're not the same item, so swap them. Otherwise, then this is going to stack this is going to place item as usual. So we'll go code this bit first. So we're going to say original slots equals moving slots. Right? No, we'll say equals new slot class moving slot. Yes. And then we can say moving slot dot clear. Yes. So this should say new original slot dot dot add item. Now item is going to be moving slot dot get item, and the quantity is going to be moving slot dot get quantity. Now I'm thinking this might actually work. However, I won't be surprised if it doesn't. Messing with inventories is always really confusing because it's very like it's hard to know what's going to happen. There we go. So now we can pick up and move items. Yes, and I can't move it onto the sword though, in which case it disappears. Fantastic. Okay, cool. So now the issue is, what should happen is first we should check if they're actually stackable. So if original slot dot get item dot is stackable. Now, if they can stack, then it's fine. Add them as normal. If they can't stack, then don't do anything, really. We should just return false. Return false. Because that means we can't put the item there. It already exists there, and we can't stack it there either. Now, if they are stackable, then we can say original slot dot add item. Well, we're going to copy these two lines. Original slot dot add item, moving slot dot item, which doesn't. We don't actually have to say that. We can just say dot add quantity, and the quantity we're going to add is moving slot dot get quantity, like so. Now, if they are not the same item, so they are the same item, they should stack. They're not the same item. This is when stuff gets a little bit confusing, because we want to swap the item that's already existing in that slot with the item in our hand. So what we have to do is actually not this, my bad. There we go. We want to say temp slot equals new slot class, and the slot class we're going to set to is original slot. Okay, so this is A. So, oh, well, this is A equals B, right? And you'll see why I add that in just a sec as well. Now, then we want to make sure, so we save the value original slot, then we can say original slot dot add item, like so. In which case now we can say B equals C, and then we can say moving item. So I'm going to duplicate this, and now C equals A. So that's a perfect swap there. So moving slots equal dot add item, and it's going to say temp slot dot item, and then temp slot. That then we don't clear it, and then we should refresh UI and return true. Yes. However, we don't actually want to say is moving false, because yeah. So what we'll do is copy this and paste that here. Okay. Now that's a little bit confusing, I understand. But the reason we have to go through that many checks is because there's many conditions and many possible places, you know, our item could go. Now, the other thing we should do is original slot equals that. Now, what if it's null, right? So what if it's this condition again? So we clicked basically outside the inventory in this condition. So we'll get rid of this one. There we go. If original slot is equal to null, then we just want to say add item class item is going to be moving slot dot item, get item. Now, I kind of want add function to have a quantity here as well in that case. So I'll have an int quantity. And that way here, I can say item quantity. That's going to give me an error down here. So we can say add item and the moving slot dot get quantity. And then up here, I'm just going to say add item that's one, like so. Okay, so we can minimize that, and that's fine. Now, what that means is basically if I click outside the inventory, the item will just appear back in my inventory, right? Yes. So do that, and then I can say if if moving slot dot clear, and then go and say else. Do this. Okay. Now, if anyone's having any issues with the code here, I know it's a bit confusing. The source code is on Patreon to download, and if you have any errors or need help, the Discord is always there. Link in the description to join and send your errors through. But we're getting close to the end of the episode here, I think. So I can pick up and move. If I pick up and move these, there we go. They swap. Now, it's hard to tell which item we're moving, obviously, because of the whole fact that we don't actually have a cursor for it yet. So that's why we have this cursor. Now, up here, I want to create a private serialized field game object, as always. So serialized field, if I can spell, private game object. And here I can say moving item cursor, I guess, item cursor, that's fine. Now we can set that later in the inspector, that's cool. Make sure you have using Unity engine.ui again. You should at this point, but if you don't, make sure you do. I'm going to minimize moving stuff. Now in update, we do need a if statement here, right? Nah, we can do it this way. Item cursor dot get components image. In fact, we can just say dot set active. Dot set active to is moving. So if we're moving an item, then it's true. Otherwise, it's false. Item cursor dot transform dot position is equal to input dot mouse position. And let's see if this works. So we should have, when we're moving an item, we should just have a red square following us now. So if I go to our inventory, drag and drop our cursor there, beautiful. Save the scene, press play. There we go. So now we have a red square following our cursor every time we're moving an item. Now all we have to do is set the image of this red square to be basically whatever item we're moving. And then guys, that's literally it. That is literally it. So I can say item cursor dot get component image. It's image, right? Yeah, dot sprite equal to. Now we only want to do this if we're moving an item. So if is moving item, then do this, because otherwise we don't want to set the image. Otherwise we'll get a null reference. So if item cursor dot get component image dot sprite equals moving slots dot get item dot icon item icon. Beautiful. And that should be fine. Now I'm going to make sure to set the color back to white, because otherwise we'll have a very red sword appear. So there we go. Press play. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we can move our items around and it looks very nice. So as you can see, that's what I mean with the item swapping when we try placing it on top of the other items. If I try placing it outside the inventory, you'll see it just goes back to the first slot. And if there's already an item in the first slot and I try placing it, it goes back to the next slot, etc, etc. And that's pretty much it. One thing I do want to test really quick is if I go to inventory, let me have another apple appear. So we've got 5 apples. So we should have 10 apples in total, but in different slots. There we go. Yeah, and we removed 1 apple. Okay, so if I want to place this apple on top of this apple, they should combine. Boom, 9 apples. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. We do have an error, but that is in the Unity cloud, so I'm going to ignore that again. Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. We now have items that which can be moved around in our inventory and stacked. And I'm actually quite happy with this. Let me know what else you guys want to see. There is more we can add to this. For example, if I right click, I can pick up half a stack or something like that. We can go into a lot of detail, but it depends completely on how the episodes do. So if you guys want to see more of this, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, show some support, show some love. And yeah, so that again, saving or loading depends entirely on the feedback of the videos. So yeah, if you want to see more, leave a like, you know what to do. Source code will be on Patreon if you want to download it. That said, thanks for watching, guys. I will see you in the next episode or next series. That's it for this one. I will catch you guys later. Take care and peace.